seen it. Been driving all along, feel like I'm dreaming. Okay.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to Street Apologists Live. I'm your host, Vocab Malone. This is a Christian Urban Apologetics show where we serve the underserved and look into the overlooked. That's right, that's what we do here. And please subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, drop a comment, give a super chat, hit the bell, Patreon, buy a book. I don't know. Today's Monday, November 28th. It's almost 3:10 p.m. here in Phoenix, Arizona. And we're going to be looking at a very important Bible verse today. Revelation 2:9. I've been talking about this recently. That was actually an accident. I wasn't trying to hit the button again. I've been talking about this recently, and I want to kind of finish the series on it because a lot of the stuff I've done related to this have been on other channels. This is a very controversial verse being misused by everybody from Christian rappers to Hebrew Israelites, and of course, we cannot forget our other anti-Semitic non-friends such as folks on the white right. Okay. Revelation 2:9 says this. You know what? Let's just read the whole section here to the church in Smyrna, and then we'll do a little background, okay? To the angel of the church in Smyrna write, these are the words of him who is the first and the last. Proof text for the deity of Christ there, by the way. People just jump right into that text, give it an anti-Semitic interpretation, and don't even look where Jesus is known as the first and the last. That's a title for Yahweh. That's a term for deity. Who died and came to life again. That's proof of the resurrection. The God-man. I know your afflictions and your poverty, yet you are rich. So you're going through something right now, and you ain't got much physically and materially, but really you're rich. I know about the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. We're going to focus on that verse to read the rest here real quick here. Do not be afraid of what you're about to suffer. I tell you, the devil will put some of you in prison to test you. You will suffer persecution for 10 days. 10 days there indicating an intense, short, brief period time of suffering. Now remember, this is written to the church of Smyrna. To Smyrna, okay? That's where it is. Smyrna. Let's do a little background here. And talk a little bit about this. This is along something called the Pergamum, okay? And it competed with Ephesus for preeminence in that area. Usually Ephesus was the winner, but Smyrna is an important cosmopolitan city here. Second city in Asia, allowed to establish an imperial cult. And that's that was considered a good thing for folks. You know, they're patriotic, you know, they're down. They're singing the songs, right? And I like this emphasis on resurrection. Maybe it's because years earlier, well, literally centuries earlier, Smyrna had a recovery of its own. And kind of a resurrection, you could say. And that may be relevant to these Christians who are going to face actual death, right? And so you see these contrast here in the beginning of it to this letter to Smyrna, and then we're going to look at 2:9. But first, let me read verse 10, the rest of it. You will suffer persecution for 10 days. Be faithful, even to the point of death, and I will give you life as your victor's crown. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who is victorious will not be hurt at all by the second death. That's important to remember, right? Very important to remember. So here we are. We're learning a little bit about the background context, and we are going to look at Revelation 2:9 until everyone understands it better, okay? And we're going to look at what the scholars have to say today. So I've got a number of commentaries here, big old stack of books. But we're going to start off simple with the NIV Cultural Background Study Bible. That's what I've been reading from. We're going to start off simple here. Shout out to Mr. Phil Fox, who gifted this to me. Thank you. Let's just see what this little note says. So starting off kind of basic here with the study Bible, a serious study Bible, but nonetheless. Study Bible. Not a commentary yet, but the The big study Bibles have scholars, and you can find out who contributed to what chapter. I'll probably look after I'm done with this if you guys want me to. Here's what it says. Jews were exempt from worshiping the emperor. And that's true. I've talked about that. And that's because the Romans respected the antiquity of the Jewish religion, even though they found them a bit odd. That's the kind of the general view that the Romans had of the Jews. And so they said, okay, you guys got the one God thing. We're not going to make you worship the emperor. If Jesus' followers became unwelcome in the synagogues, however, they became vulnerable to accusations of disloyalty against Rome. So it's almost like there was a protection to be covered under Judaism, because since the Romans respected it, then if you were a Christian and you were seen as Jewish, then the Romans would say, well, they don't have to worship the emperor. But if you get kind of outed as a follower of Messiah and then not truly down with the synagogue, then Rome can say, well, you should be worshiping the emperor. This is really what happened, okay? Smyrna's Jewish community apparently remained on good terms with their city, but they could not afford to take chances. The Judean War against Rome 2 decades earlier, because it's written probably around 96 or so. So 70 AD, 2 decades earlier, right? You see? Judean War against Rome 2 decades earlier resulted in a special tax Jews everywhere in the empire had to pay. Many Asian Jewish leaders, so this has to do with Asia Minor, geographic location, understand that? Everywhere in the empire had to pay. Many Asian Jewish leaders thus could have grown uncomfortable with any association with prophetic, messianic movements like the movement that followed Jesus. So they're trying to give the perspective here of why certain Jewish people in Smyrna may have done what they're doing in regards to the Christian churches in the area. So you're kind of understanding the full context here, right? Later in the early 2nd century, some Jewish accusers participated in denouncing Polycarp, bishop of Smyrna, so same city, and a disciple of the Apostle John at Polycarp's execution, and that's found in the Martyrdom of Polycarp. All right. Could someone link to that, by the way? I see Nate. I see JP, Deshaun Love, Missy. How you doing? Bryant Savant, Jose Colorado. What's up, bro? Antonio Powell, Jeff, how you doing? Born Again Rome. Can someone drop a link to the Martyrdom of Polycarp? I know it's available at New Advent, I think is the website, and our early Christian literature. What is that? The CCCEL or whatever. Gerard Perry, what's up from Brooklyn? Can somebody drop the link to the Martyrdom of Polycarp, the actual letter? I want people to have a chance to read this so they can know the source here for what we're talking about here. The live chat in my channel is expected to be active and involved participants. Unless they're just haters. Normally, Roman officials tried cases only if accusers brought them forward. Such slander could be in view here. For example, earlier accusations against Christians in Acts and Thessalonians, and I got a bunch of references here. Commentators often envision a similar background for the Gospel of John. A synagogue of Satan. So we're going to talk about that phrase. First, we're talking about the slander aspect. Now we're going to talk about this phrase, synagogue of Satan, which does appear in Revelation 2:9. Some other Jews, especially those who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls, condemned the rest of Israel as apostate. So the Qumran community, that's the area by the Dead Sea where the Dead Sea Scrolls were most likely produced and definitely housed, right? That is the Qumran community, and we can tell from their sectarian documents, so these are the non-biblical documents peculiar to their group, they thought all Judaism was apostate, right? And they would even call them the congregation of Satan. So that is a phrase that some Jews actually call to other Jews. So sometimes people are like, oh, this is Gentile anti-Semitic propaganda, because it does say synagogue of Satan. Now, we want to understand what that means, though. It doesn't mean what Bizzle said it means and IUIC said it means recently. It doesn't mean that. But it does mean something. So let's find out what it means. But I want to first draw the point out here. This isn't some like Gentile thing. This is something that you would have Jewish people saying to other actual ethnically Jewish people because of perceived lack of religious fervor or accuracy. Understand this? This is important. Christians, listen. This will help you understand Revelation 2:9 and indeed 3:9 better when you read it in your Bible and hear the cults twist it. Yes, Nate, that's it. Thank you. You got it. That's it. And Lightfoot is a good translation. Give it up for Nate 2D2 in the house. You get the air horn, brother. That is it. That's exactly what I was, So let me actually, since you did that, brother, I'm going to go ahead and pin that. We'll pin something later on. Nate, this is not your fault, Nate, but if you could try to remind me that I should always be pinning a comment every show. I should always be pinning something. I don't always remember. But there's the Martyrdom of Polycarp. Thank you, brother. So they would even call them the congregation of Satan during that time, right? John applies this harsh language only to the believer's direct opponents. This is not a model for how Gentile Christians should address synagogues. This was the sort of intra-Jewish challenge that characterized strong debates about Jewish identity among various competing Jewish groups in this period. And what it's saying is who identifies as actual Jews according to being faithful like Abraham. Doesn't mean you're not ethnically Jewish, because you had the Qumran community using this in regards to what they regarded as a corrupt system. They called the rest of Israel, not part of their community, the congregation of Satan. During that time, they weren't saying that they were not ethnically Jewish. Do y'all understand? This is important because you can't let IUIC snow you when they hand you a flyer. Shout out to DLC for Christ for the super chat. First super chat of the day. First true chat of the day. And listen, to the Hebrews Lights in the live chat, you can say all the kind of stuff you're going to say. You're not going to stop the movement and you're an agent and all this. Look, bring the context I'm bringing. I'm referring to scholars today. I'm going to be going in to scholarly sources, and the first one was just a study Bible. I haven't even really gotten to the deep weeds yet. And you're going to hear some of the same stuff again, and the point is to understand the background better, because guess what? You weren't alive during then, and you may not read Hebrew and Greek and Aramaic and Syriac and relevant things to this. So what we do is we find that out, and then we cross-reference scholarly sources and find out the best thing instead of just listening to a cult leader. We can have the scholars check each other. It's a system of checks and balances. But if you're not even looking into it, then you're not even really in the ball game, So that's all I'm saying. So, I know that John Walton and Craig Keener are the authors for this. And I believe that Keener is the primary guy there in the New Testament, Walt being the primary guy in the Old Testament. Keener's a good scholar. So this is almost like Keener's a little commentary. So even with the study Bible, you're getting some good resources off the bat. Now, it's time to go deep, baby. It's time to go deep. I knew somebody would come in here and criticize. Oh, you're looking at commentaries? I read books. Books are important, Let's look at books. Let's find out what they say. We're going to start off small here. A lot of you don't know, but Bruce Metzger, Bart Ehrman's teacher, but he himself was faithful, has a little commentary on Revelation called Breaking the Code. Understanding the Book of Revelation. Very short little book. I was surprised when I saw that he put this out. Just a small little comment here, okay? Small little comment here, okay? Looking at Revelation chapter 2, verse 9. He doesn't say a lot about it in the 2:9 section, but I'll say what he says, and then I'm going to flip to his commentary on 3:9, okay? Because here's all he really says here in 2:9. This is on page 33. The letter to the church in Smyrna is the shortest of the 7 messages, and like the letter to the church in Philadelphia, contains no condemnation, only commendation. The Christians at Smyrna had to endure persecution and deprivation, due no doubt to their refusal to take part in ceremonies connected with emperor worship. And really, this is what people call the mark of the beast, I think, would look like. It's just sort of a lockout of Christians to the economic system. It doesn't have to be some actual mark. I don't think it is. I don't think there's any indication of that. And so they were facing a sort of a short version of that back then. In addition to poverty, the Christians of Smyrna had to bear with the lies spread by certain Jews who were accusing them of being agitators against the civil authorities. Page 33. Notice there's some similarities here. So we're getting a full picture. We've just looked at Metzger and Keener. These are good scholars, okay? Now I'm going to turn to a resource that's a little bit different. It's called Revelation 4 Views, Revised and Expanded. Steve Gregg. This is an interesting book published by Thomas Nelson, where it's really a parallel commentary here. And I'm just going to read a little bit of what he says in Revelation 2:9, okay? And this is kind of less thick, if you want to put it that way, as far as academic speak goes than some of the other sources, but it's helpful nonetheless. The way he writes is clear and plain. And here's what he says, page 97. Again, this is all about Revelation 2:9 today. You're going to learn, ladies and gentlemen, as in the case of the Philadelphian church, 3:9, the troublers of the church in Smyrna are those who say they are Jews and are not. In other words, unbelieving Jews, whom Jesus here considers to be a synagogue of Satan. Remember, Jesus speaking. And this is the same kind of thing he said in John 8:44. Continuing on, Smyrna had the largest Jewish population of any Asian city. If this was written prior to AD 70, then it was a period in which the main adversaries of Christianity were the Jews. So that's on a whole. The church there was understandably harassed more than most. So that's more of a, most likely a more closer to full preterism position. I'm a partial preterist, so I wouldn't do that. I do not believe that Revelation was written prior to 70, but we're sharing different perspectives here. So I said what the scholars say. I didn't say they are going to agree on everything. We're going to sort through everything. But that's a good hypothetical that he puts that in there. That's what you're supposed to do when you write these kinds of things. You give viable alternative interpretations before sharing why the more likely one is the one that you usually say for last. That's usually how the commentators do it often. The Christians should not. Okay, well that's actually. Hold on. Okay, okay. Now let me flip down here. Okay, one other little paragraph. Ready? The church in Smyrna was soon to become a special object of diabolical malice. As the devil was about to throw some of you into prison, you will have tribulation. God has a purpose for this, however, namely that you may be tested. Such testings are not to be feared, but should be cause for rejoicing. Matthew 5, James 1. Since they are intended to produce endurance and result in the glory of God. Romans 5, James 1, Peter 1. Since the persecution is said to be instigated by the devil, and since the Jews of Smyrna were a synagogue of Satan, it is probable that the persecution here, as elsewhere, was brought about by the local Jewish community. See Matthew 23, Acts 13, 14, 17, and 1 Thessalonians 2. So we're getting up we're getting the perspective here. Very similar so far. So far, what we've read are some shorter commentaries. And I know when I was on another program about this, I said, don't worry, I'm going to get to some dispensational commentaries. I don't even know if I did during that particular program, but I finally do have my dispensational commentary here. Revelation of Jesus Christ by John Walford, okay? This is a prominent dispensationalist from yesteryear and written another number of books that people would know. And so he's going to share that perspective, which I would say is somewhat similar to what the others have said so far. Let's find out here. Page 61. It would seem that their persecutors were not only pagans, who naturally would be offended by the peculiarities of the Christian faith, but also hostile Jews and Satan himself. Recognition of the opposition of Jews is made in verse 9, where Christ said, I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. As Alford observes, quote, so this is from Alford, page 566. These slanderers were in all probability actually Jews by birth, but not in spiritual reality. And what do you need for that? Romans 2:28, Matthew 3:9, John 8:33, 2 Corinthians 11:22, Philippians 3:4. That is a common idea. Jewish by birth, but not in spiritual reality. The way the cultists are misusing Revelation 2:9 these days on the internet and in their chants and their flyers and their videos, people are even using it as code now. I was watching some gal on TikTok the other day, and she kept on saying, the Revelation 2:9ers, the Revelation 2:9s, like it's so clever. Everyone knows anyone who knows anything about the Bible knows what's going on, right? So Revelation 2:9, right? So people were using a code to say, everyone who traditionally identifies as a Jew is fake, and we are not, and they are, right? But that's not what the Bible was ever saying. The same who everywhere in St. Paul's time and afterwards were the most active enemies of the Christians, in quotes. Now, beginning again with Walford here, because he was quoting someone, right? Alfred confirms this interpretation by the account of the martyrdom of Polycarp, in which the Jews were active. So let me just stop there. How many times have you ever heard a Hebrew Israelite even mention the martyrdom of Polycarp? And we're not even quoting Polycarp to say, well, Polycarp said this. No, what we're doing is taking a very early account from Christian history in which the bishop of Smyrna is persecuted, and there's important background to it. And Polycarp was a disciple of John. So this is very relevant. They don't even look at anything beyond their own preconceived notion cooked up in, southern Mississippi by a white racist somewhere, and then these guys picked it up. Really, probably it was even before that, because I think the British Israelites over there in the UK were using this against Jewish folks prior to that, right? Remember, Anglo-Israelites beat the Hebrew Israelites by about a century. Hey, Nate, since you found that, can you look real quick? I want to confirm the date of Polycarp. The date of Polycarp. I think it's, I know it's between, I think it's around 104, but don't quote me on that. Nate, can you drop when the martyrdom of Polycarp was said to have happened? If you could please do that. So continuing on here. Thus, it has always been in the church. False religion has been most zealous in opposing that which is true, and it's still true today. Hebrew Israelites act like they're victims. Really, they are part of the persecution of the church. Showing up at churches, harassing people, sheep stealing, they are actually part of the persecution of the church. I'm not talking about them killing us or anything like that, right? Although if their desires were to be fulfilled, with a lot of them, if we're honest, but they're part of that because they're part of a false religion, and those are often the most zealous in opposing that which is true. The Smyrna Christians found few friends in the hostile world around them. Okay, so that's Walford. So we're looking at the smaller commentaries so far, and I'm kind of moving on to some of the bigger ones here now in a little bit. Okay, now this one is not bigger in the sense of the size. This is Barclay's Revelation of John, but the entry is kind of long. Barclay was kind of a moderate, but a lot of evangelicals found his commentaries useful because they're written not too heavy academically, and they were affordable series, kind of easy to carry around. But he's kind of a moderate type evangelical-ish, would be the way I would describe him. I heard one person call him a wild-eyed liberal. I disagreed with that assessment of Barclay. But, he has different views on things. But one thing I like about Barclay is he always brings a good dose of Greco-Roman information into the conversation. He may sometimes even overemphasize Greco-Roman elements, but I like what he does here. Now, I appreciate everybody in the live chat. Shout out to Abu Kamer. I don't know. I don't know if was Polycarp. I don't know if. Hold on. Was Polycarp that late? You may be right. I may have been thinking Ignatius, which would be earlier, but can you give me a couple of sources? I got sources over there, but I'm not going to grab it now, and I may even get to one of these now, but I'd like to see what people say. Hey, Ham Sunshine knows who Steve Gregg is. Now, remember, so it was 155. So I was off, and that's why I asked the live chat. Ginger got 155 AD, which does, and see, yeah, I was thinking between Clement and Ignatius, or sometime after that. Those are the earliest, but Polycarp is a little bit later, and it makes sense because he was 86 when this happened. So this is 155 AD. Fascinating. That does sound right now, so thank you, Abu, and thank you, because now that you say that, that does sound right. Shout out to everybody, especially Timothy Ross, who just gave a super chat. Thank you, and to the people who are getting that information here. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Ginger. Brian Israel, I hear you, and I'll let you say what you want to say, but you're not really contributing to the conversation. Now, we're not hating on you for that, but listen, step up your game. And I'm not trying to diss you, Brian Israel. I see you're zealous for what you believe, but you're just kind of rambling from what you already know. It would be good for you to learn something and to understand a little bit about this, and to add something positive contribution to the conversation. Do you have anything that backs up your point of view in regards to Revelation 2:9? Because I'm dropping I'm dropping a lot of stuff here today. So I'm not saying you got to do all that, but you got to do a little something. Shout out to Paul, shout out to Rocket, Bosch, Giovanni, hey, and shout out to Gerard Perry. That's Polycarp's perceived lifespan, I believe, 70 to 155 AD. So, he had been 20 some, it is from what we know, or when Revelation itself was written, from what we know. Yeah, I'm not going to bring you on live. I'm doing something else, and you haven't shown yourself to be very good so far, so I don't know I would want to bring down the quality of the show. But if you want to come on a show tomorrow and bring down its quality, join me tomorrow in the smoke room, Bryant Israel, and I'll be more than glad to bring you on, and you can discuss what you're going to discuss. But in the meantime, try to add some positive comments. So here we are now in page 76, and let's look at Barclay's commentary. There remains one feature of Smyrna which stands out in the letter, and which had serious consequences for the Christians there. The Jews were especially numerous and influential. We find them, for instance, contributing 10,000 denarii for the beautification of the city. So these are other sources he's drawing from to show how we know what's going on with the communities there. You understand? It is clear that in Smyrna they were especially hostile to the Christian church, no doubt because it was from them and from those interested in Judaism that Christianity drew many of its converts. So then, we may well end this study of Smyrna with the story of the most famous Christian martyrdom which happened there. So he's going to get into Polycarp. You ready? Polycarp, Bishop of Smyrna, was martyred on Saturday, February 23rd, AD 155. It was the time of the public games. The city was crowded and the crowds were excited. Suddenly the shout went up, "Away with the atheist! Let Polycarp be searched for!" No doubt Polycarp could have escaped, but already he had a dream vision in which he saw the pillow under his head burning with fire, and he had awakened to tell his disciples, "I must be burnt alive." So Polycarp could have escaped, but he didn't. And the crowd referred to Christians then as atheists. And I used to sell a shirt that I thought was dope that said second century atheist. And people had the hardest time understanding what it was about. And what I was saying is that back then, because the Christians did not believe in any of the established official gods, nor the God of Judaism, according to their Roman oppressors, they were viewed as atheists, non-believers in the gods. Shout out to Jazz M for the super chat. Thank you very much. I want to say sister. I imagine that's a sister with that cat thing. I'm hoping that's the case. Thank you very much, sister. Okay, now, continuing on here, let's look at what Barclay says. So then we may well, I already read that, my bad, okay. No doubt, okay, I read that, but too much. His whereabouts was betrayed by a slave who collapsed under torture. They came to arrest him. He ordered that they should be given a meal and provided with all they wished, while he asked for himself the privilege of one last hour in prayer. Imagine that's his dying wish. On the brief journey to the city, he pled with the old man. What harm is it to say, Caesar is Lord? Oh, sorry, I skipped a sentence here. Not even the police captain wished to see Polycarp die. So this police captain is actually pleading with Polycarp on the way there. On the brief journey to the city, he pled with the old man. What harm is it to say Caesar is Lord and to offer sacrifice and be saved? But Polycarp was adamant that for him only Jesus Christ was Lord. When he entered the arena, there came a voice from heaven saying, "Be strong, Polycarp, and play the man." I like that. Don't you? Play the man. The proconsul gave him the choice of cursing the name of Christ and making sacrifice to Caesar or death. 86 years I have served him, said Polycarp, and he has done me no wrong. How can I blaspheme my king who saved me? The proconsul threatened him with burning, and Polycarp replied, "You threaten me with a fire that burns for a time and is quickly quenched, for you do not know the fire which awaits the wicked in the judgment. For you do not know the fire which awaits the wicked in the judgment to come in an everlasting punishment. Well, why are you waiting? Come, do what you will." Ooh, this dude, right? It's fire. Oh, bad pun. So the crowds came flocking with, I'm not going to read the word it says here because it'll be misconstrued, but basically sticks that they would hit with and that they would use, I'm sorry, sticks that they would use to light up. It's a word that has changed its meaning and whatnot. So the crowds came flocking with these sticks from the workshops and from the baths, and the Jews, even although they were breaking the Sabbath law by carrying such burdens, were foremost in bringing wood for the fire. They were going to bind him to the stake. "Leave me as I am," he said, "for he who gives me power to endure the fire will grant me to remain in the flames unmoved, even without the security you will give by the nails." So they left him loosely bound in the flames, and Polycarp prayed his great prayer. So check this out. Isn't this dope? Paul Rasmus says, this is where we get atheists from. Well, atheist is just the, what's it called? The alpha derivative, or I'm sorry, deprivative, negative. Dang it, now I'm in my Greek. The alpha... It's where you put the A in front of something to negate it. And so you have theist. So theist, one who believes in God. Theist, atheist, does not believe in God. Yeah, that's really what it is there, right? And Gerard Perry knows that's what's up, right? And so, we're looking at this, right? And I appreciate everyone in the live chat. I won't be able to get to everyone else's stuff, but I appreciate what you're saying here. And yeah, a lot of great comments here. Okay. So he says, "Hey, you ain't got to tie me up. I'm not going to escape, man. I'm not going to go anywhere. Just let me pray this prayer and listen to this prayer. O Lord God Almighty, Father of thy beloved and blessed child, Jesus Christ, through whom we have received full knowledge of thee, God of angels and powers, and of all of creation, and of the whole family of the righteous who live before thee. I bless that thou hast granted unto me this day and hour, that I may share among the number of the martyrs in the cup of thy Christ, for the resurrection to eternal life, both of soul and body, and the immortality of the Holy Spirit. And may I today be received among them before thee as a rich and acceptable sacrifice, as thou, the God without falsehood and of truth, hast prepared beforehand and shown forth and fulfilled. For this reason I also praise thee for all things. I bless thee, I glorify thee through the eternal and heavenly high priest, Jesus Christ, thy beloved child, through whom be glory to thee with him and the Holy Spirit, both now and for the ages that are to come. Amen. Notice it's Trinitarian there at the end. He doesn't say the word Trinity, but you see that? So much is plain fact, but then the story drifts into legend. So that's what Barclay says. For it goes on to tell that the flames made a kind of tent around Polycarp and left him untouched. That is what the story says. At length, the executioner stabbed him to death to achieve what the flames could not do. And when he did this, there came out a dove and much blood, so that the fire was quenched, and all the crowd marveled that there was such a difference between the unbelievers and the elect. What is sure is that Polycarp died a martyr for the faith. If it can have been no easy engagement to be a Christian at Smyrna, and yet the letter to Smyrna is one of the two in which there is undiluted praise. Now, that helps us understand a little bit better, but that's not all. Page 80. And so you see Barclay packs a lot in here, okay? Page 80 says this: "The story of what happened at Antioch shows us how the Jews often succeeded in moving the authorities to take action against the Christians." Acts 13:50. "Around the Jewish synagogues gathered many God-fearers." Now, that's a technical term, and if you study the literature, you'll see that that's the case. Hebrew Israelites, if they're one-Westers, don't want to believe it, but that's a fact. Shout out to Jesse Walsh and Jude Young and Akeen and all the other people watching on Facebook. Shout out to y'all. We got a lot of people watching on Facebook, because you can watch on Facebook as well as YouTube most days. So here we go. Continuing on, we're reading from the commentaries to find out what do the scholars say about Revelation 2:9, because you got a lot of cults misusing it to try to basically bonk Jewish people over the head to say you're not really Jews, which is a form of Jew hatred. Fact, but that's not what it means. Continuing on, what is a God-fearer? These were Gentiles who were not prepared to go the whole way and to become proselytes, but they were attracted to the preaching of one God instead of many gods, and were attracted specially by the purity of the Jewish ethic as compared with the heathen life. So the God-fearers are Gentiles who are kind of hanging out on the outer edge of the synagogue, so to speak. That's going to be a ripe field for Christianity, right? You see? But the folks at the synagogue ain't going to be too happy about losing their God-fearers. This is going to happen. In particular, women were attracted to Judaism for these reasons. Often these women were of high station, the wives of magistrates and governors, and it was through them that the Jews got at the authorities and moved them to persecute. Very fascinating. We have accounts of this. John calls the Jews the synagogue of Satan. He is taking a favorite expression of the Jews and reversing it. So this is why I want to bring up the commentaries, because this is important to understand. So look, check this out, people. We've already seen from Keener, who pointed out the reality that congregation of Satan was used by fellow Jews against other Jews they viewed to be apostate during Second Temple Judaism. Specifically, the Dead Sea community at Qumran levied it against the whole of the nation of Israel. But it wasn't about who was truly ethnically Jewish, yet they used a very similar phrase. Now we're going to see how this synagogue of Satan phrase also has power in that it's a reversal of something that you would want to say for yourself. Watch, this is important. I hope you're tracking. Audience, be sophisticated. I'm not a quick YouTuber guy because I'm trying to really do something here. And sometimes it just means I'm reading books to you. That's something, though, because I had to buy the books and I had to know where to turn and I had to be able to read. When the people of Israel met together, they loved to call themselves the assembly of the Lord, or the assembly of Yahweh. Numbers 16:3, Numbers 24, Numbers 31:16. Synagogue is in Greek synagoge. Synagoge, which literally means a coming together, an assembly, a congregation. It is as if John said, you call yourselves the assembly of God, when in fact, you are the assembly of the devil. And by the way, that's where the AG church, the Pentecostal denomination that I mainly grew up in, that's where they got the name from, Assemblies of God, from that actual phrase. Once, John Wesley, father of Methodism, shout out to Wesley, you know we Reformed brothers like him. And I'm not joking, by the way. We do like Wesley, and we like the hymns of Charles and John as well. Once John Wesley said of certain men who were presenting a crude picture of God, "Your God is my devil." It is a terrible thing when religion becomes the means of evil things. It has happened. In the days of the French Revolution, Madame Roland uttered the famous cry, "Liberty, what crimes are committed in your name?" There have been tragic times when the same could be said about religion. 6 slanders were regularly leveled against the Christians. Here they are. So it doesn't mean that all these were being used, but when we look through the sources of Christianity, and I did a paper in seminary called Studying Early Criticisms of Christianity from the words of their critics or something like that, where I went through, I think, 10 different guys in depth to see what were their primary criticisms against the Christian church at the time. It was fascinating. On the basis of the words of the sacrament, "This is my body and this is my blood," the story went about that the Christians were cannibals. So that's a slander. Because the Christians called their common meal the agape, the love feast, it was said that their gatherings were orgies of lust. That's a second one. Thirdly, because Christianity did, in fact, often split families, when some members became Christians and some did not, the Christians were accused of tampering with family relationships. Jesus said that would happen. That's a third slander. It's like, it's not the point of it, but that could happen. It's different than what IUIC does because they do it purposefully based upon certain things. But anyways, fourthly, the heathen accused the Christians of atheism because they could not understand a worship which had no images of the gods such as they themselves had. So, not state gods? Where are your gods? You're an atheist, right? Fifthly, the Christians were accused of being politically disloyal because they would not say Caesar is Lord. And that's why Christians had to defend themselves against charges of being unpatriotic back then. Sixthly, the Christians were accused of being incendiaries because they foretold the end of the world in flames. And that is literally what happened during the fire that broke out that Nero was most likely not responsible for because he wasn't even there. So the idea that he fiddled over the flames of Rome, he wasn't even there. So that's not really likely. It seems like it basically was an accident. That's something else I did a paper on. Was ancient fire teams and all this stuff, and about that fire in Rome and what it meant, right? But anyways, Christians were known to have this idea of an eschatology that ended with fire in some way, right? And so the early Romans were like, well, maybe you guys set fire to Rome. And Nero then blamed them, and we read that account in Tacitus. Yes, Gerard, Barclay was a progressive in some ways, and I did mention that earlier in the show. And so I'm reading from a variety of sources here. I want to bring that out. It was not difficult for maliciously minded people to disseminate dangerous slanders about the Christian church. All right, so are we understanding what's going on here? Are we seeing what's going on? I hope that we are. I hope that this is helping so far. But we're not done. We're not done. You know we're not done. How you doing, live chat? I need to get a little water. Okay, so let me explain what I'm doing here. Revelation 2:9 is in the beginning of the book of Revelation. And Jesus, he gives these messages to 7 churches in Asia Minor, Turkey and whatnot. And he has messages for these churches about their situation, some commendation, some condemnation. And in the section to the message, the church Smyrna, Jesus uses some phraseology that he used earlier. It's foreshadowed in John 8, and now he's using something similar again, right? He's saying those who say they are Jews but are not, they slander, and then he says, synagogue of Satan. That's really what they are. Now, we've been explaining what that passage means here, giving you a in-depth contextual background understanding. And it's all based upon the letter itself and other places in the New Testament, such as Romans 2:28, for example, and John 8. Those are very important, okay? And the reason why we're doing that is so you can learn the truth before you see the counterfeit. The counterfeit is the false interpretation given by IUIC as they passed out flyers at the Barclays Center. And some of the groups are going to do again, by the way, this weekend. And I guarantee you they're going to be quoting Revelation 2:9 against Amalek, as they would say. But I'm going in depth to explain to you what's really here. Okay, and we're looking at a number of commentaries to do that, and then we're discussing it amongst ourselves. Yeah, someone drop Romans 2:28 in the live chat, please. So that's what's popping off. Now it's time to move to a big boy. The Baker Exegetical Commentary in the New Testament Revelation. Grant Osborne. You guys ready for this? No, do. All right, here we go. The second factor, this is page 131 of Osborne's commentary. These are good, by the way, all these. The second factor describing their affliction was slander. In Greek, ten blasphemion. Elsewhere in the book, the term is used in its more basic New Testament sense of blasphemy against God. Revelation 13:1, 13:5, 13:6, 17:3. The two, however, are closely connected. Slandering the people of God is one form of blasphemy against God. Jewish opposition to Christianity is quite common in the NT's New Testament. Throughout the book of Acts, we see that the Jews were the primary opponents and caused many problems. That's true. But that's not all, and history also doesn't end there. So we're taking the context for what it is. And remember, they're persecuting primarily fellow Jewish people, right? So this is Jew-on-Jew crime or slander, as it was, right? Caused many more problems than the Roman authorities, who often were reacting to Jewish complaints. And then there's a whole bunch of examples that Osborne gives from the book of Acts. This was nowhere more virulent than in Smyrna, with its large and highly visible Jewish population, many of whom were citizens and all of whom wished to protect their rights. In the Martyrdom of Polycarp, 12 and 13, we find a similar situation in the mid-2nd century, 155 specifically. Shout out to the chat for that. Ironically, the Jews denounced Polycarp and the church before the Roman authorities for defaming the emperor and the Roman religion by refusing to worship the emperor. Then they helped gather wood to burn Polycarp even on the Sabbath. That's messed up, right? Yarbrough Collins, 1986, page 313, believes that the slander by the synagogue of Satan refers specifically to a group of Jews who instigated legal action in the Roman courts against the Smyrna Christians. And again, if we're going to talk about who's the synagogue of Satan, it's going to be the Hebrew Israelites in the modern day era. Because when you talk about instigating legal action, have you guys seen Kelly's latest videos where he says, I'm not going to debate my ethnic heritage. I'm going to decide everything in a court of law. I'm suing everybody that comes against me now. I've got a letter from him and his attorney multiple times, cease and desist, telling me stop talking about him or we're going to do this and do that. Same thing from William Brown. I don't talk about this much because it's not really part of the mission. I have got the same kind of letter from Rakah from GOCC. I got the same kind of letter from the Melanated People's Council. No one still knows what that is or who they are. To the Academic Advisory Board at Talbot when I was doing my DMin. Lengthy PDF. I still would love to know who's behind that. My goodness, that thing was wild. Caused all kinds of problems for this young man. I was a little younger then. I've gotten legal threats from IUIC multiple times, so have my buddies. There's some other ones. Honestly, I don't even remember them all, but that's just the tip. Yeah, really. I just don't talk about it a lot. But yes, this is true, what I'm saying here. And it's just not that important or relevant. You know, groups like Sakari, they fight dirty, they lie, they slander, they talk about minors, children. You know, they're okay to do stuff like that. But they don't go around trying to sue people, you know? So, You got Dante Fortson over there trying to have me declared as leader of a hate group and have the NAACP denounce me as being an anti-Semitic cult leader. Go look at the petitions at change.org. It's so funny. Okay. Anyways, let me not get sidetracked. The rest of the verse is a stirring denunciation of their claim to be the people of God. That's really what this is about. They say that they are Jews, but in reality, uk eisen ala synagoge tu satana. They are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. In other words, the claim of these Jews to be the people of God is obviated. That's a great word. Can someone drop that definition there in the chat? OBVIATED. Maybe Nate, go to Merriam-Webster. OBVIATED. I love to see words like that defined for the audience. I am vocab. By the fact that they are tools of Satan against God's true people, the church. This is a point made often in the NT. In John 8:31 through 47. Yeah, it is true. One day I should go through that document. I don't be making stuff up. I make mistakes because I'm not human, okay? And sometimes I go out of pocket and I got to apologize. That's true, okay? You know, I'll admit it, right? But I don't be making stuff up. I don't be, lying and doing that, yeah. So, like, what I'm telling you is true, people, All right, here we go. OBVIA. IUIC's primary threats came via YouTube situations. So their attorneys are actually claiming that I trademark infringed them. So getting videos taken out, but it was done through a legal standpoint. And with Andrew Rappaport, whom I did appear on, they actually sent him a cease and desist as well. Obviate, to anticipate and prevent or make unnecessary. So it's like a negation of something. Isn't that cool? Thank you. Appreciate that. Remove a need or difficulty. Yeah, I figured Bear King that that's what you would say. Let's time out Bear King for his disrespect and slander. Come back with the truth. I've talked about this, and a lot of the stuff I'm talking about I have documented even briefly, but I don't really care what you say. IUIC's legal team did go after my videos, though. I didn't say they threatened to sue me, but if you read the full stuff when you're a YouTuber, you'll see that that's part of it. What's up, Rory? How you doing? All right, keep on going here. Da 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 da. In John 31 through 47, Jesus responds to the Jewish claim to be the children of Abraham. So they said, we are the children of Abraham, by stating, you belong to your father, the devil, 844. This is the kind of stuff rabbis would say to each other. Pharisees would argue like this. Jewish people would argue against other fellow religious and ethnic Jews this way. Jesus does it. The community Qumran did it. John does it. It's something thoroughly Semitic. And to the people who act like they're saying that it means Jewish people are not actually descendant in any way from Abraham, and that's what the verse here is saying, they don't properly understand the Hebraic Semitic background, and you're showing how Gentile you really are by your very misuse of the verse. Ain't nothing wrong with being a Gentile. You just got to own it, like I do. Viva Italia. In Romans 2, 28 to 29, Paul says that a true Jewish person is not identified by outward national origin, but by inward trust in God and his Son signs. Also see Galatians 6, 15. And in Romans 11, 17 through 21, Israel has been removed from God's olive tree due to unbelief, and the Gentiles grafted in. That's what the Bible says. A good biblical commentary will refer to the Bible. Thus the Jews of Smyrna may have called themselves the synagogue of God, like Numbers 16:3, but the exalted Christ here states that they are actually Satan's synagogue. You see that? You see that? The choice of Satana is deliberate, as the term is a Hebrew loan word meaning adversary. See, again, you would understand that. That's the adversary element has to do with the slander they're leveling against the church to persecute them. See, the One West interpretation makes mishmash of this. Depicting this arch enemy of God and his people as supremely hostile, filled with hatred and slander. Mounts 1998, page 75, says that in Greek, the term means slanderer or false accuser. The Jewish people, in their opposition and slander of God's people, have become one with Satan. It's talking about in this context, in Smyrna, okay? I know someone's going to take that out. Bredin, 1998, page 166-64, adds that this phrase may also reflect the tension between the relationship of both Jews and Christians with Rome, specifically the Jewish charge that Christians were not Judeans, that is, exempt from the Roman demand to participate in their religious practices. Thus, the synagogue of Satan is also a synagogue in collusion with Rome as they denounce Christians to the authorities. Do you guys see this? Do you guys see this? And that all makes perfect sense. This idea that Revelation 2:9 has Jesus saying in 90 some AD, let's go with 96, even if you make it 70, whichever date you want to go, 96 AD. Hey, the people meeting at the local synagogue there in Smyrna, they're actually not ethnically Jewish, and that's why they're persecuting you. And they're saying they're the real Jews and you aren't. That's the slander. Already they had infiltrated, but I thought you One Westers mainly say that modern day Jews folks are converts or proselytes, imposters, usually Khazarians, you say, Turkish people, you would say. But that happened in the Middle Ages, man, in Georgia and Armenia and all of that. So how does that relate to 96 AD? Already there's a bunch of white folks meeting at the local synagogue in Smyrna, and they're the ones persecuting the Christian church? Is that what you're trying to tell us? Explain the contextual, historical context of Revelation 2:9, you cultists, please. Beg Supreme, I love you, but please stop whining and doing the whataboutism and the stop picking on us. Your cultic interpretation, Beg Supreme, of your cultic leaders for your cultic religion is going to be challenged today, and until God tells me not to. So instead of telling me, talk about the Talmud, I'm going to talk about the Bible. You could talk about the Talmud if you want to. I'll let you spend your time focusing on the Talmud. I'll focus on the Bible and your cult. I'm sorry. Now, we're still going through this, and I'm probably going to not get to all the commentaries today. And let me tell you why. The George Eldon Ladd commentary on Revelation I already dropped in a previous interview, and I think it was one of the times I was talking with David or somebody. And also, the Mounds commentary on Revelation, I've already dropped too in another live stream, because I've been on this for a while now. This one, I know I did talk about Beasley Murray's in the thing with David. I know that I went to this as well. And I believe I went to Poythress as well on The Returning King, A Guide to the Book of Revelation, and what he had to say. And I believe a lot of this was with David. I can't remember if it was someone else too. I think it was mainly with David. So I went to Expositors recently with David as well. So I've already went to those, so I'm not going to go back to those, okay? But I am going to go to some others, and I'm probably going to skip one because it's so far afield from the other things, this More Than Conquerors, the Hendrickson. I think he's like a post-meal or something, and maybe he's on-meal, but I don't know. He looks like a nice old guy, I guess, but it feels like it's going to take us way off on another subject. Honestly, I'm probably going to get rid of that commentary soon. I don't really need it. Now, there's two big, thick ones here I'm going to try to get to towards the end. But before I do that, I need to read kind of a key statement here. These are the two we're going to get to in the end here, by God's grace. But let's kind of zoom out for a second and look at this. All Things New, Revelation as Canonical Capstone by Brian Tabb. Every single one of these silver books edited by D.A. Carson is a treasure. For real, is a treasure, okay? You want to get all of these, okay? So let's see what he says. I got it marked out here, and I thought it was pretty cool what he says. Wait, where did it go? I mean, I thought I had it marked out. Oh, there it is. Okay, this is page 111. So this is kind of a conclusion of the matter type thing, and it's really good. Jesse Walsh, I have the Beckwith book, but have not made it through all that way. You know, Beg Supreme, that's all she's got. You have no evidence. Well, Beg Supreme, my job here today is to not prove that. My job is to just disprove your cult's false rendition of Revelation 2:9. So I'm doing my job. Are you doing yours, being a good cult member by repeating what you've heard on YouTube videos? Yes, you are. Congratulations. Congratulations. Okay, here we go. Page 110, 111. The apocalypse clarifies and dramatizes the church's true identity, present struggle, and future hope. God's people are presented as lampstands who must bear divine light and truth in a dark world. The church expresses this light-bearing vocation as Jesus' witnesses who proclaim truth about Jesus, follow him in his experience of suffering and rejection, and thus establish the legal charge against the unbelieving world that refuses to repent and submit to God's rule. Here's the important part I need to read. Listen up, everybody. Listen up, everybody. Listen up, everybody. The church also fulfills the Old Testament offices of king, priest, and prophet. The redeemed are designated as a kingdom and priests to God. Revelation 1:5, who typologically fulfill Israel's vocation as a priestly kingdom. Exodus 19:6. Their true worship and steadfast allegiance to Jesus and his kingdom in the present age anticipates their glorious future in the new creation, in which they will perform unending priestly service in God's presence and will reign with Christ forever. Revelation 22:3 and 5. Further, the church carries out a prophetic vocation as they keep the words of this prophecy, 1:3, and hold fast to the testimony of Jesus, 19:10, while resisting serpentine prophecies that promote idolatry and immorality, 2:20 and 24. He's summing up from Revelation. You guys see that? You guys see that? Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Revelation also presents the church, the followers of the Lamb, as the new Israel. The seminal images of the 144,000 sealed from Israel's tribes, 7:4-8, and the innumerable multitude from all nations and languages, 7:9-14, present complementary depictions of the same reality. I've done videos on this, all right? And you guys need to watch those about the 144,000. He's saying what's true here, by the way. The seminal images of the 144,000 sealed from Israel's tribes and the innumerable multitude from all nations and languages present complementary depictions of the same reality, the complete number of people that God has redeemed by the Lamb's sacrifice and preserved from coming judgment. In contrast, Christ designates unbelieving Jews who slander the saints as a synagogue of Satan, 2939. Those who truly belong to the 12 tribes of Israel, 2112, confess the message proclaimed by the 12 apostles of the Lamb, 2114. Do you guys understand that? And you can see Schreiner further for that, 2013, page 629. The true identity of the church is the people of God, in contrast to these unbelieving people who are prosecuting them there at Smyrna and Philadelphia. So this is important because we understand our identity. We don't need to get some other ethnic identity, right? John and his Christian brethren are partners in the tribulation. Ente Flipse 1:9. His authoritative visions offer a sober reminder that followers of the Lamb will face slander, suffering, and perhaps the state's sword. 2:9-10 and 13 and 13:10. Nevertheless, the apocalypse summons God's people to faithful endurance, come what may, and resilient confidence in God's sure promises to execute perfect justice and restore all things. Therefore, those with ears attuned to the Spirit's message to the churches must conquer, not by military force or political power, but by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. 12:11. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Ain't it, though? Now, I'm turning here to the Dictionary of Later New Testament and its development. This is a compendium of contemporary biblical scholarship. And there's an entry here that I think is important to read. It's got a little bit to it. I mean, look at this. But let's go. And we're zooming back out to finish the last two entries in this, about what the scholars say about this, all right? Rivalry between church and synagogue. This is under the entry synagogue on page 1145. Let me take off the cover here. All right. Although the letter of James reflects a familiarity with the term church, ecclesia, in order to refer to communities of believers, James 5:14, the term synagogue also appears in James 2:2. The usage does not represent a formal claim to replace the most prominent institution of Judaism after AD 70, but the willingness to use the word itself is notable. That's important. James is willing to use synagogue to refer to Christians meeting. And he's a very early letter and viewed often as the most Jewish out of all the New Testament epistles. It probably means no more than an assembly in context, but an assembly for the purpose of discerning and keeping the true royal law. James uses that term in 2:8. He doesn't use Mosaic law. He uses royal law. Ask a Hebrew Israelite, what's the royal law? It's the law by the king, the law of love, the law of Christ. All the same, just different dimensions of the same beautiful diamond. Represents an implicit challenge to other congregations which claim to uphold the Torah. And this is the kind of thing James is talking about there in Acts 15. James uses negative examples to insist by way of contrast that the poor should not be treated worse than the rich, James 2:17. That the whole of the law is to be understood and the commandment to love, James 2:8-13. That faith apart from action is dead, James 2:14-26. The principal ethical interest of the letter closes with an explicit encouragement of prayer, James 5:13-18. Underlined as the letter is generally with scriptural example and allusion. The letter, in other words, is setting up the church as the true synagogue, a school of wisdom and action whose curriculum is the law correctly understood. This is important. That is right. That is beautiful. That's accurate. That's why I read these, because they put it in such a helpful way. And I pray you guys are following along. This is by Bruce Chilton, by the way. Now, I read the latter part of this already, I believe, but I did not read the first part of it. So now I've actually finished the entry to this, because in another show, I read the second part of the entry, where it talks more about Revelation 2 specifically. So you guys see what's going on there? Okay, now hold up. One more to go. We got one more to go. Yoon is kind of a moderate scholar. This series is 3 volumes just on Revelation. If you notice, this is number 52 in the set of the Word Biblical Commentary. And it's only Revelation 1 through 4. If you get these now, they don't use the dust cover jacket. It'll be like imprinted on the cover itself, but here's what it looks like without it. Okay, this is kind of a long entry. Are you guys ready? I'm ready. Look at that, yo. All right, here we go. This is the last one. Here's what we're doing, everyone. Here's what we're doing. We are looking at commentaries from scholars from Revelation 2:9 so we can understand what Revelation 2:9 uses, or what it means better. Because Hebrew Israelites are misusing Revelation 2:9 as a way to hammer Jewish people over the head as if to say that they're not ethnically Jewish. But that's not what it means. And we've proven that again and again here. I imagine to someone who does not have ears to hear, they will simply say something like, Vocab just read a bunch of Edomite scholars. First of all, you don't know the ethnicity of all these people, my goodness. Second of all, truth is truth, all right? Second of all, we're reading things where the sources are referenced or went into, and then we're cross-referencing a wide swath, a variety of scholars, not just people who share our view exactly. That's important. I hope people understand that. That's what we're doing, and then we're doing what my professor taught me in regards to biblical interpretation. We're synchronizing. We're synchronizing it. And that's where you have a synthesis of everything together, looking at it all at once with a big picture, comparing, contrasting, putting it together, and finding out what's right. 9, Revelation 2:9. And the slander of those who call themselves Jews. The term slander, a term particularly appropriate for those who belong to a synagogue of Satan, since the name Satan means opponent or adversary, as does the Greek term diablos, devil. Here it is important to realize that the term Jews is used positively, i.e., of those who were committed to do the will of God. So what he's saying is using Jew in a way here means you're committed to doing what Abraham did, basically. You see what I'm saying? That's what it means. That's why they said, we're the sons of Abraham. He said, no, you're the son of the devil. You know, John 8, right? You guys following that? You guys following that? Okay. So it's used that way. And what it's saying is you're not doing what you said. It has nothing to do with ethnicity, man. Nothing at all. You can't even find legitimate commentators who even entertain that option because it's ridiculous. It's not even on the table. You know? But that, according to John, those who call themselves Eudia do not live up to the standard implied in that designation. And that's backed up in the Theological Dictionary of the New Testament. You can see the entry there. Here and in 3:9, where a close parallel occurs, the author is not condemning Jews generally, but only those associated with synagogues in Smyrna and Philadelphia. Context, context, context. You don't get to jump to New York City with Revelation 2:9 like that. This is analogous to Paul's claim that to be a Jew means to be circumcised in heart, which can even apply to those who are not physically circumcised, i.e. non-Jews. Romans 2:28, his figurative use of Israel. Galatians 6:16, 1 Corinthians 10:18. It is even possible that the author is implying that none but his own community are true Jews. So you want to know a little bit more of how John was thinking? I'll tell you. He's saying Christians are the real Jews. And by that, he means spiritually. It's not had to do with ethnic. Nothing to do with ethnic. John himself was Jewish. So he got it both ways. Understand? Blasphemy is frequently used in Revelation for reviling or speaking irreverently of God, but is used here in the more general sense of slander. And they give a bunch of verses for this. I just can't get through all the verses because there's so many. The specific form of slander was apparently a byproduct of Jewish Christian hostility in Sardis and involved either verbal slander. The verb there is used to describe Jews who revile Paul, and in Acts 14:2, it is said that the Jews poisoned the minds of the Gentiles against Paul and Barnabas, or the denunciation of Christians before Roman or civic authorities. And we've discussed that at length in the very beginning of the show. Jewish Christians in the late 1st century AD were still able to maintain connections with Jewish communities and so avoid the possible obligations of emperor worship. In certain situations, therefore, Jews had the option of denouncing such Christians to the authorities. And it may be this practice to which the term slander refers. Colin Hemmer refers to that. An example of such denunciation occurs in Acts 18, in which Jews brought charges against Paul before Gallio, who considered the case to be an intramural Jewish problem. Verbal slander is a less specific understanding of slander and could involve the spreading of false rumors about Christians by Jews, such as in Justin's dialogue with Trypho or Tertullian or Origen, and they give the exact references there in the word commentary. Christians were accused of various types of criminal or antisocial behavior. You can read Justin's Apology or Athenagoras for that, or Theophilus as well, or Tertullian. Some Jews were also vulnerable to denunciation, for some apparently avoided the head tax of 2 drachmas imposed by Titus. See Josephus there, or Diocassius for that. By practicing Judaism privately or by concealing their nationality. Suetonius talked about that. So remember, because of the Judean War in 70, there is an empire-wide tax specifically on Jewish folks. And so some folks would hide their nationality or practice Judaism privately to avoid it. Understand? According to a tradition stemming from the last days of Jesus in Jerusalem, the Jews urged Pilate to execute Jesus. So this is how he talks about it, tradition, right? I'm not saying it's true or false, but he refers to tradition, which is not necessarily incorrect per se. But some scholars talk about it a certain way. So I'm not just reading only super conservative Christians here, right? That's really not the point when you read a scholar. It shouldn't be anyway, right? This tradition has influenced the depiction of Jews in the Martyrdom of Polycarp, in which they angrily denounced Polycarp publicly, actively called for his execution, and tried to prevent Christians from retrieving the body. That wasn't very nice, guys. This account, however, is historically tendentious, as well as strikingly anti-Jewish. So that's how he describes the Martyrdom of Polycarp. Consciously formulated in an attempt to replicate the gospel narratives of the Passion of Jesus. And there's scholars who agree with that perspective. Again, I'm saving the more moderate one there last. Look at these comments. You guys' comments are just so insane. Just America has a price to pay. Bring something productive instead of your rage to the conversation. You bring the rage, I'll bring the page. You guys bring the gauge, I'll bring the page. Oh my goodness. Sometimes you just want to... He argues that Bushman argues that anti-Judaism and the Martyrdom of Polycarp function as a weapon against Judaizing Christians. So, like, kind of like propaganda, basically, is what he's saying about it. Okay, Justin Martyr, who moved from Asia Minor to Rome, mentioned that Jews persecuted Christians, and he gives all the examples there, and also that they cursed Christians in their synagogues. And he's not the only one. Epiphanius also says that, perhaps referring to the so-called Berkat HaMinim. Berkat HaMinim, or curse against the heretics. By the way, that's a real thing that exists, all right? Which is primarily directed against Jewish Christians, and Kindelman has an article on that. Justin is also of the opinion that Jews have spread false rumors about Christians. According to Acts 26, when Paul persecuted Jewish Christians, he attempted to force them to slander or blaspheme. I'm sorry. Did I say blaspheme? Did I say slander? I meant blaspheme. Probably to curse Christ. And Eusebius and Justin speak on that too. Eusebius quotes Apollinarius, latter half of 2nd century, who affirms the Jewish persecution of Christians in Asia Minor. There are many passages in both the Pauline letters and Acts that describe Jewish persecution of Christians in various ways. So it's just showing this and how this relates to a very contextual situation, okay? That's what's going on, all right? It has to do with those who not only deny the truth of what God has done through Christ, but also then who turn around and actively claim to be the true purveyors of what God is doing, and then persecute those who are actually God's true people in a spiritual sense. Understand? Here, it is important to recognize that the emphasis on Jewish hostility and persecution as a major cause of the suffering of Christians was in part of a theological convention in Christian apologetics requiring little or no evidence. So, again, I am reading something from a more moderate scholar You understand? Okay. And that's how he talks. So I'm getting various perspectives. The point here partially is to show you this is what you do when you read scholarship. You don't just read people you agree with. That's the problem with Hebrews Lights. You just click on YouTube videos that you agree with. And when you have someone like me who you don't agree with, instead of saying, let me learn something because he's actually reading books and da-da-da, I'm just going to type stuff I heard on my cult leader's last podcast at him. That'll do it. Yahushai's proud of me now. Yahushai, did you like that? One frequently occurring theme is that of the violent death of the prophets, i.e. Israel is guilty for rejecting the word of God by persecuting and killing the prophets who brought that word. Tons of references here. The Gospel of John may reflect historical experience in the expulsion from the synagogue of followers of Jesus. Tertullian referred to Jewish synagogues as fontes persecutioniorum. That's Latin. Fonts of persecution. Though here he is referring to the historical experiences of the apostles as he understood them from the NT. In verse 10, the Smyrnians, people who live in Smyrna, are told that the devil is about to throw them into prison. John is just called Jews, a synagogue of Satan. Further, Antipas has already been killed, verse 13, and John expects that more Christians will be executed. If Christians had suffered legal penalties at the hands of Roman authorities in Smyrna, such actions were probably initiated by local citizens, and this passage strongly suggests that the Jews actively participated in the process. Now, there's a big thing in here where they get into A. N. Sherwin White about legal process in Rome. I'm going to skip that paragraph and move on to page 164. There's a lot here, okay? I hope everyone can follow along here, all right? The meaning of Iudias is problematic. It could have at least 4 meanings in Jewish inscriptions. See also the corrective discussion in von der Horst, and he refers to Kramer as well. 1, a person born a Jew. Josephus qualifies the term Jew with the phrase, and he says Jews by birth. 2, a pagan adherent to Judaism, not a proselyte, Dio Cassius there. Someone from Judea, not necessarily a Jew, number 3, perhaps, and he gives one possible example of that. 4, a name, and 5, a person who obeys the will of God, i.e. is circumcised in heart, if not in body. Romans 2:28 and Revelation 2:9. Those are the references he gives, rightly so. It should be noted in connection with 3, that's someone from Judea, not necessarily a Jew, that meaning. It should be noted in connection with 3 that according to Solon, Iudias almost always denote membership in a Jewish religious group and hardly ever denote ethnic or geographic origin. And he gives an article for that. During the late 1st century AD, Judaism was a major diaspora ethnic group in the Roman Empire. Listen to this, everybody. And this is a figure I've heard in other places, by the way. Of an estimated total population of 60 million, between 4 and 5 million were Jews, i.e. circa about 7% of the total population within the Roman Empire. While Christians constituted a minuscule minority group that probably numbered no more than 50,000 by the end of the 1st century. Wilkin is the source there. You guys see this? Now, going on to 9c. Here we go. But are a synagogue of Satan. So we're breaking down 9 in its component parts. And even though we don't agree with everything he says, you can see he's an expert on 1st century stuff within the Greco-Roman context. And that's why we can learn from people who are not believers. I don't know his particular persuasion. Okay. I'm not saying he's not, but I'm just saying the larger principle applying. Okay. Okay. But are a synagogue of Satan. This statement, taken with that which immediately precedes it in verse 9b, constitutes an antithetical statement in which the infinitive introduces indirect discourse. John could be referring to Jews who had forsworn their faith and maintained only an ethnic tie to Judaism. A 2nd century AD inscription from Smyrna lists a group of people designated as a word that some have understood to mean former Jews, who had donated the sum of 10,000 drachmas to the city and received citizenship by abandoning their ancestral religion. So notice there, we talked already from Keener in the beginning, where he mentioned that as well. So you have two scholars mentioning this same element, and it teaches you something about the Jews at Smyrna at this time. You guys understand why it's helpful? Now, he gives a little more information. They had received citizenship, but they had to abandon Judaism to do this. Interesting, right? these folks at this time. Yet, A.T. Crable has convincingly argued that the phrase should be translated people formerly of Judea, immigrants from Palestine, since a record of public works, he argues, would be an inappropriate place to record one's apostasy. Understood in this way, so now we're arguing over an inscription. This is sort of the way scholarship sometimes will dovetail or go off into other arguments in relationship to a larger point. So you really have to have your thinking cap on and your attention span really glued in to follow these kinds of scholastic arguments, because it's talking about the phrase, but to do so, it first debates the meaning of an inscription. So now we're getting into the exegesis of an inscription. You guys, I just want to expose you to this and understand that, okay? Are we following here? All right. Very interesting stuff either way, right? Okay. Understood this way, the inscription provides important evidence that Jewish immigration from Palestine continued into the 2nd century A.D. Similarly, an inscription from Miletus, and he gives the references for these, reveals that Jews had their own reserved seats in the theater in spite of the pagan religious character of the setting. In an inscription from Hypatia, south of Sardis, the phrase junior Jews occurs, a group of young Jewish boys belonging to the Ephebic system of athletic education. I do not know what Ephebic means. E-P-H-E-B-I-C. Someone look that up, please. Ma'am. It is perhaps more likely, however, that the author of Revelation is referring not to apostate Jews, but rather to Jews who are opposed to Christianity. And there's a good article by A.Y. Collins, Vilification and the Self-Definition in the Book of Revelation from 1986. But notice what I said. That's how scholars argue. They say, this guy says this guy says this, here's what I say, or this is how, and sometimes they don't even make definitive statements. Sometimes it's just, well, could be this, what do you think, right? But this is helpful to bring to the forefront here in relationship to this. This is the first of 2 occurrences of the phrase synagogue of Satan in Revelation. The other occurrence is in 3:9. This phrase may reflect the beginnings of the separation of the church from the synagogue. For the phrase church of Satan seems impossible to imagine. There is a related parallel in John 8:44. Notice how many times John 8:44 has come up. You can't properly refute the false interpretation of Hebrew Israelites in Revelation 2:9 unless you go to John 8:44 and Romans 2:28-29. That's really all you need. Now, there's some other passages you could do, but those two explain what it is, besides the context itself, okay? There is a related parallel in John 8:44 where Jesus claims that the father of the Jews with whom he speaks is the devil. Now, again, in John 8, those Pharisees, were they actually not ethnic Jews? No. And by the way, who wrote the Gospel of John on the human tip? John. Who wrote the Book of Revelation on the human tip? John. These are Johannine themes, people. Are you seeing? That's what good biblical theology will do, where you tie in one's own canon within the New Testament, if there is indeed a canon. Jude doesn't have one, right? But John does, Peter does, Luke does, and you say, let's put this together. This is the first of 2 occurrences of the phrase. Oh, I already read that. Okay. There is a related parallel in John 8:44 where Jesus claims that the father of the Jews with whom he speaks is the devil. Revelation 3:9 is a very close parallel as well. Behold, I will cause those of the synagogue of Satan who call themselves Jews but are not, but lie. The phrase synagogue of Satan has a very close parallel in the expression congregation of Belial, which is an alternate name for Satan. Remember how I told you that the Qumran community used this? Here's the actual reference. Whenever you see Q in a reference, it means first, in this reference I'm about to give, it means first Qumran cave. 1QH 222 and 1QM 49. Those are literally the DSS references there. So you can look and see fellow Jews use this against other Jews they view to be of the wrong religious strand during this time. It's not what Hebrews like to saying it is. Jews use this against Jews to diss them on the religious tip, not the ethnic tip. Hey, live chat, you're getting kind of wild. And talking about all kinds of other stuff and going off. And some of you people need to be timed out. Nate, I don't know. You might be the only guy. I'm sorry if you are. I don't know if you can you clamp down on some of them? And tell me if there's any people that we should make mods in here that are here. because we need to get this. We need to get this. All right, we need to do this thing. Okay, so Belial is an alternate name for Satan in 2 Corinthians 6:15. For 15 other references, okay, I'm not going to read all these, but and then 1QS5 1-2 has the parallel expression congregation of the perverse men. 1 Qumran M15:9, congregation of the wickedness. Do you see this is a common thing, right? They have the phrase that gives this is in Barnabas now. Is the phrase groups, synagogues of evil people. This may reflect a cosmological dualism that divides the world of humanity into two separate and hostile camps, with Christians by implication belonging to the synagogue of the Lord. That's from his work Combat Myth, page 159, Yarborough Collins. On the other hand, the opposite conception of the people of God is reflected in the phrases congregation or assembly of Yahweh. Again, Numbers 16:3, key for that. Numbers 24 as well. And Numbers 31:16, a similar one there. Translated in the Septuagint, a possessive gender meaning assembly belonging to the Lord. The term synagogue refers to an empirical community, members of a Jewish community who meet for worship. Leonada is the source for that. To be distinguished from the place where such groups meet. Understand that? I hope that makes sense there. See the excursus on the. Okay, it's getting really deep into the woods. I'm going to skip some of this. We're almost done here. It is also important to note that the term synagogue has not an exclusively Jewish term. There are a number of other terms in addition to synagogue that Jews in Asia Minor use for the places of worship, such as place of prayer, and that's Josephus Antiquities, or perhaps a term for a private home in which Sabbath services were held, and just simply place. All right. Last thing I'm going to read here. Okay, are you ready? And then we are done reading the commentaries. One of the striking features of Revelation is the virtual absence of the typical features of the polemic between Jews and Christians, or the inter-Christian concern with the threat of Judaizing. The two references to Euodia in Revelation 2:9 and 3:9 are similar in that the claim to be Jews is rejected. They are instead labeled as a synagogue of Satan. In 2:9, the issue of their blasphemy is mentioned, which may be the denunciation of Christians to local authorities by Jews. All of this is extramural. The only two references to Israel occur in 7:4 and 21:12. It is striking that, apart from the controversy of eating meat previously sacrificed to a pagan deity, 2:15 and 20, certainly an intramural issue in Acts 15, there is a complete absence of controversial issues in terms such as law, covenant, circumcision, Sabbath and festival observance, fasting, and the legitimacy of sacrifices. This may all suggest that the author, while certainly of Jewish origin, espoused a Pauline type of inclusivism, with the major exception of the issue of the propriety of eating meat sacrificed to pagan deities. Interesting stuff. Sometimes when you are first exposed to stuff of this nature, you kind of go, what? But then what happens is you get more exposed to it and you come around. You kind of be able to follow along there. That's right, we're going to be doing a smoke room tomorrow. Smoke room tomorrow, you don't want to miss it. Should be interesting. And I just cut up like 14 new videos. So after these lives, we'll be dropping a bunch of conversations about these topics. Me, myself, David Wood. In the meantime, why don't you go buy my book? Give it to somebody for a Christmas gift. Much love, y'all. God bless. Peace out.